cartographer's meridian. Could a woman build her entire career on a lie and still deserve to be loved? The year was 1887, and the Royal Geographical Society of London had never, in its 112 years of existence, admitted a woman. That fact was not merely policy. It was architecture, woven into the stone of the building, into the rituals of the lecture hall, into the very grammar of the letters its fellows exchanged. And yet, in the autumn of that year, its most celebrated junior fellow had spent the last 4 months corresponding with a cartographer in Vienna whose maps of the Ottoman interior were so precise, so luminously detailed, that 3 separate expedition teams had requested her work by name. Her name, of course, being the problem. She had signed every letter, every paper, every annotated survey as E. Voss. Initials only. The society assumed, as it always did, that initials meant a man. The cartographer was 31 years old, the daughter of a surveyor who had taught her to read topography before she could read sentences, and she had been hiding inside those 2 letters for 9 years. Not out of shame. Out of strategy. She had learned early that the world would not take her work seriously if it knew her hands had drawn it, so she had made herself invisible inside her craft, and her craft had become brilliant enough to travel without her. The Society Fellow was 34, a geographer by training and a traveller by compulsion, the second son of a Shropshire family that had expected him to manage their estate and been quietly horrified when he chose instead to spend his 20s mapping river systems in Anatolia. He was known in the Society's corridors as exacting, demanding of precision, and constitutionally incapable of accepting work he did not trust. He had praised E. Voss in a lecture to his colleagues. He had called the Vienna maps a kind of genius. He arrived in Vienna in October to commission new work for an upcoming Nile expedition. He expected to meet a scholar. He met her instead, in her studio above a watchmaker's shop, surrounded by drafting tools and stacks of survey notes, ink on her fingers and an expression on her face that told him, in the space of 2 seconds, that she had been expecting this meeting to go badly. She had not planned to deceive him in person. She had planned to tell him immediately. She had rehearsed it. But he walked in already trusting E. Voss, already grateful, and the words she had rehearsed dissolved, and she said only that she was his assistant, managing correspondence while E. Voss travelled. She would pass along his commission. It was the worst decision of her life, and she made it in 3 seconds, and she would spend the next year paying for it. He returned the following afternoon with questions. He came the day after that with more. Within a week he was arriving in the mornings with coffee and an argument about river gradient, and she was answering him with the full force of everything she knew, which was considerable, and he was looking at her in a way she had not been looked at before. Not with dismissal. With recognition. It was intoxicating and it was terrifying, and it was already too late. By November they were working together daily. By December she had drawn 3 preliminary survey maps for the expedition while he watched, asking questions she answered with her hand still moving. By January he had told her, quietly, over dinner in a cafe near the Stephansdom, that he thought she was the most remarkable person he had encountered in a decade of travel. He was not speaking to E. Voss. He was speaking to her. To the woman who claimed to be the assistant. Annie. Voss, sitting opposite him with her fork still in her hand, felt the particular cold of a lie that has grown large enough to have its own gravity. She was afraid of a specific thing, and she had been afraid of it for 9 years, that her work, if attributed to her correctly, would be reclassified. Not dismissed outright, perhaps, but quietly moved from the category of serious contribution to the category of charming accomplishment, the way people spoke of a woman who played the piano beautifully, as though beauty were the ceiling of what she could achieve. She had built E. Voss to escape that reclassification, and now E. Voss had become the wall between her and the only person who had ever looked at her work and felt, she suspected, something close to what she felt when she made it. He had his own fear, which she did not yet know. He had spent his career refusing to let personal feeling compromise professional judgment, because he had watched his father ruin 3 business relationships through sentiment, and he had decided at 22 that he would always choose correctness over comfort. He had built a reputation on it. He was proud of it. It had also made him lonely in a way he had stopped examining. In February she finally told him. Not because she had gathered courage, but because the expedition timetable had moved forward, because the Society was requesting a formal contract with E. E. Voss, and because continuing the fiction would require her to invent a man and sustain him through correspondence for another 8 months, which she could not do. She told him on a Tuesday afternoon, in the studio, without preamble, because she had learned by then that he responded badly to long introductions. She told him E. Voss was her. Had always been her. That every map he had praised, every technique he had described as innovative, every survey that had sent 3 expedition teams safely through unfamiliar territory, had been drawn by the woman he had been treating as an assistant. He was silent for a long time. When he spoke, he said he needed to think, and he left. She did not hear from him for 9 days, which was, she would later describe to her sister in a letter, the most instructive 9 days of her life, because she discovered during them that she had been waiting, without fully knowing it, for someone to be given the chance to value her honestly and choose to do so. She had constructed E. Voss to protect herself from rejection, and in doing so had made real rejection impossible. She had been safe and she had been alone, and she had confused the 2 states for nearly a decade. He, during those 9 days, was conducting a private reckoning of his own. He was angry, and then he was ashamed of the anger, and then he was angry again. He felt deceived. He also, when he sat down and forced himself to be precise about it, recognized that he had not been deceived about anything that mattered. The work was real. The conversations were real. His response to her mind had been real. What had been deceived was an assumption he had carried without examining it, that E. Voss was a man, which he had never been told, only inferred, and the inference had been his own construction, built on the architecture of a society that had never questioned who was allowed to have a name. He came back on the 10th day. He asked her 3 questions about the Nile survey, technical questions, the kind he would have asked E. Voss. She answered them as E. Voss would have, because she was E. Voss, and he nodded, and then he said, very quietly, that he had spoken to 2 colleagues about the expedition contract, and that if she was willing, he intended to submit it under her full name and to inform the Society, formally, of who had produced the Vienna maps. She asked him what he thought would happen. He said he thought there would be resistance, and that the resistance would be overcome, because the work was undeniable and he had spent 2 years building sufficient credibility within the Society to force the question. He said it would be a fight. He said he believed it was a fight worth having. She asked him why. He said because the work deserved to exist with her name on it, and because he thought he might be in love with her, and those 2 things were not separate. She told him that she was grateful, and that she thought she might be in love with him too, and that she was still not sure the Society would survive the information. He said that was, in his view, the Society's problem. The spring was difficult. His formal letter to the Society's membership committee generated 3 weeks of contentious correspondence. 2 senior fellows withdrew their support for the expedition. One wrote a letter to a newspaper that was, in retrospect, the kind of opposition that clarifies a debate rather than winning it, because her supporters, who were more numerous than anyone had expected, used it as a catalyst. The Society did not collapse. It bent, and then it held in a new shape. By June, the expedition contract was signed under her full name. By July, she had been invited to present her methodology at the autumn lecture series, which was not the same as membership, but was an opening that had not existed before. By August, she and the geographer had traveled together to the Swiss Alps, nominally to conduct a survey of glacial movement, and had spent considerable portions of that trip talking about everything except glacier. They married in Vienna in the spring of 1889, in the watchmaker's neighborhood, close enough to her studio that she could see the window from the church steps. He had proposed in the studio, surrounded by her drafting tools, which seemed to him the correct location, the one that was most honestly hers. She had accepted immediately, which surprised him slightly, because he had expected her to think about it for longer. She told him she had been thinking about it since February. The Nile expedition produced 7 maps, all attributed jointly, all subsequently used by 4 separate geographical organizations across 3 countries. The Society admitted its first female fellow in 1913, 24 years later, a timeline that was not as long as it might have been, partly because the question had been forced, formally and publicly, in 1888, by a geographer from Shropshire and a cartographer from Vienna who had refused, together, to let the answer remain buried beneath 2 initials. She kept the name Ede Vos on her personal correspondence for the rest of her life. Not to hide. Because it had been her first name, the one she had given herself when she was 22 and needed a place to put all the things she knew. She had grown into it, and then she had outgrown it, and then she had married and had a husband who called her by her full name every morning as though it were a kind of ceremony, which, she had come to understand, it was. The maps still exist. Several of them hang in the Society's archive in London, attributed correctly, in an anteroom that was added to the building in 1921, in a wing that was funded partly by an endowment she established before she died, because she believed that rooms matter, and that the architecture of the world is not fixed, and that someone, always, has to be willing to draw the new meridian. Did you enjoy today's story? Do stay with me for a moment. Do let me know in the comments, which city are you watching from? Did this message touch you? And if you have ideas for future stories, please share them. Your suggestion may become our next video. Leave a like if this message meant something to you. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. If you think someone else would appreciate this message, do share it. And if you'd like to support the channel, have a look at the links in the description. Some are affiliate links, which support us at no extra cost to you. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video.